and welcome to the Wild Wonder podcast, where we seek to democratize and demystify holistic wellness practices by speaking with today's leading practitioners. Today, we have Kathleen, better known as Daughter of Wands. She's an Astro-Herbalist and describes herself as an astrologer and advocate for misunderstood, poisonous, wayside, and invasive plants. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristen, and happy new moon in Scorpio.
Happy new moon. I would love for you to describe what it is you do, because that's a lot that I just said, right? An astro-herbalist, and then you're like this advocate for these plants that nobody seems to like. So please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much again for having me. Yeah, I am a herbal practitioner who focuses on interstitching my own astrology practice with my herbal practice. So what that kind of looks like in terms of what it is that I physically do on an everyday basis is that's working with plants in an astrological setting and sphere, as well as learning astrology through plants. So it's this kind of constant back and forth where I'm kind of like the alchemical Mercury of like it kind of going back and forth through me, and I'm kind of translating a lot of it. So again, what that practically looks like is doing a lot of flower essence work, because I'm someone who's more interested, I shouldn't say more interested, but a lot of my work kind of encompasses more of the psycho-spiritual aspects of plants. And that really easily translates to how we connect to planets and signs and the astrology aspect of it. Now, I actually started learning astrology through the lens of medical astrology. So that's
I don't know that I've heard medical astrology.
Yeah, so medical astrology is just another branch of astrology where kind of where the beginnings of like clinical medicine began as well, where, you know, thousands of years ago, people were practicing magic, medicine, and astrology literally as one offering, as one thing. And that was like ancient Greece and ancient Egypt, in the age of Alexandria, kind of intermingling all of these things. So it's kind of from that where it's kind of like what I'm doing, where we kind of focus on the holistic, the whole body, the whole self, where we look at physical symptoms. I do one-on-one consultations with clients where we would actually look at the natal chart and kind of talk about where we're maybe emotionally at, where we're maybe even spiritually at, mentally at, and physically at. And we kind of look at what the planets are kind of storytelling and what we're kind of moving through as larger and smaller cycles, and then kind of mixing that in with deep listening, of course, as we do in consultation work, and kind of matchmaking a plant to help facilitate that process of growth and understanding for that individual. And I think that plants are really great allies and ambassadors for what's going on up above, you know, as they say, up as above, so below. So plants really do have a lot of influence on planetary movement, and it's just so fascinating. And the way that goes through with medical astrology is, if you've seen, you know, Aries rules the head and Pisces rules the feet. You know, there's so much with medical astrology that we can definitely get into, and it's something that I'm always fascinated by. But really, it's the influence of the heavenly spheres and the constellations on and through and with our body. And so with certain transits, we might notice, like seeing medical astrology in action, we might notice, for example, you know, it's a full moon in Scorpio. Today it's a new moon in Scorpio. So it's a sun and moon conjunction. And this one just so happens to be opposite Uranus. And so we would see where they're sitting in the signs of the zodiac. So it's in Scorpio. And we would say, you know, some people, if they have a lot of planets in Scorpio, or for me, Scorpio sits at an angle in my chart, a pretty important part. It's actually my IC. So, you know, we each individually are going to feel that in the body if we have it in this certain area. So, you know, Scorpio is kind of the urogenital areas of the body. It's the reproductive systems, it's sweat, it's all the things that penetrate, in and out of the body. And sweat is one of those things. As an example, it's just like we can go down so many different levels of it, but the planets can and may, actually have a relationship and to our physical body. We might feel it down here on Earth, and it really depends on, you know, how sensitive we might be if we have certain things in our chart that really delineate so certain sensitivity or to that planet. For example, so obviously, not every single person is going to feel the new moon in Scorpio in a physical way, whereas someone else might. So, that's in a nutshell what medical astrology is. There's probably a better definition that I could give, but yeah, it's the relationship with the body and the planets, and that marries so well with with herbalism, because we know plants have a deep medicinal quality for us humans as well. So it's a really natural pairing with astrology and plants. Planets and plants. And I just love the story that I'm able to tell and that I'm honored to tell and engage with through being the weaver of those two disciplines together. And it's just like, for me, it's one of those things as a daughter of Jupiter with a lot of Sagittarius planets. For me, I will never be uninterested or unpassionate, or I will never lose interest in it, because I can be a lifetime student of it and continually learn more. And I won't even fill enough in 3 lifetimes of all there is to know about either of these individually. And to me, that's worth it. That's being fast. Oh, I'm sorry.
Explore energy. You, Kirsten.
that unending quest is just amazing to me. So yeah, that's kind of what I do. I'm realizing that that's also still pretty vague, but
maybe we can make a practical example. So what it sounds like to me is that you're taking this really spacey concept of astrology and bringing it back into the body and using plants to do so. These two very material, big things for us that we could touch and feel and experience.
Yes, I'm making indigestible things digestible, or intangible concepts tangible. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's say I was going through a difficult period in my life where I had this foot infection. I think this is a good concept, because you mentioned feet, and I was like, this would have been the time that I probably would have gone to see you. And there was no way to get rid of it. Doctors had no idea. They're like, we did all there was to do. There's just, this is what you got. And so your body decides it's not there anymore. You have this infection and you just have to deal. At the same time, I'm going through this big, stressful, life upheaval, right? Tower moment, right? All my life had been swept away and completely changed, right? It's pandemic 2020. I think that happened for everybody.
Yeah.
So I think in a practical way, I could have gone to you and been like, Kathleen, this is what's going on. I have this infection in my foot. I have no idea what's happening in my body, and I can't get rid of it. I've tried everything. I am in this stressful moment in my life. And you would then probably bring up the chart, right, and see what's going on.
Yeah, totally. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was something going on with Neptune, something going on with Pisces specifically because of the feet thing, and maybe something with Mars, because Mars in your chart, or with your chart, because Mars rules infections and hot infections, right? So probably something mixed in with that, but I'm just, we're not going to pull up your chart for purposes of privacy, but kind of looking at. And there's also going to be surprising things, and there's a lot of overlap, which can be when we're first learning astrology, when we're first learning plant stuff, and when we're especially first learning medical astrology. There's a lot of overlap. So it might not be Mars. It could be maybe something else, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was Mars stuff. So we would kind of look at what's happening in the chart, who's the culprit, and also looking at the chart for where your inherent strengths are, or where your inherent maybe patterns of natural imbalance might be. As I also like to look at the asteroid Hygeia, which is not looked at a lot, and because she's like all of the asteroids in astrology, very new to the whole.
I don't think I've ever heard of it.
Yeah. So Hygeia, goddess of health and hygiene, where we get the name hygiene from, but she there's a lot of we don't know about them because granted for the 2000 years of like working with these planets, we have a good long case histories of like what these planets do. For asteroids, they've only really been around at the most for 200 years. So there's still a lot that we have to continue to learn with them, but we can begin to pick up on them with transits, like, and with our own levels of noticing within our own charts what they could possibly lead to. And for me, I'm still doing a lot of actual case studies with Hygeia before I can really feel comfortable begin to talk about what she does, quote unquote. But for me, what I'm seeing with individual clients is that it's the story of our relationship to health, and more specifically what that means, our relationship to like well-being in general. And that includes not our physical health, it includes everything beyond that as well. So like what we need in an environment to feel well and supported, that's Hygeia too. What we need in our like how we need to feel creative, that like impacts our health and well-being too. So like Hygeia is kind of like what we need as a whole to feel in balance and well. So I like to look at Hygeia in the chart when we're really unsure of what that kind of looks like and how to anchor the quote unquote remedy or the balance to what is going on. So for example, like looking at your Hygeia, I might say, oh, well, it looks like your Hygeia is in Virgo. So here's a little, and it's also making this aspect to another planet. So this is the underlying story that I'm seeing with like the foundational levels of what you need. And maybe it's as simple as I mean, Virgo can be digestion, and I mean, that's the moon, but it's your small intestines, and how Virgo is like how you actually assimilate nutrients into the body. It's all those internal things. So, it can be like how you're actually emotionally processing things right now. And it's kind of has this sextile to Jupiter, and you need these larger concepts to help anchor things like that. So it may be really unexpected ways that can help support and put you in an environment to nurture your process of growth and your process of healing and being and feeling connected to the self. And then of course the act you're doing, I'm making a custom essence for you, and then you take that, I ship it to you. You take that on with, and we actually pick a significantly astrological date for you personally to begin a regimen. So we look at your moon cycle. We might do it on your lunar return. We might do it during something where you begin your regimen so that that's like fully supported. And then we have a follow-up consultation about a month, anywhere from a month to actually 6 months later, because sometimes people really need a lot of time to process. And then we kind of move forward from there, and we might adjust the formula, things like that. So it's a lot of it has to do with like, it's up to you. Like I can't take that essence for you. Your doctor can't take the pill for you.
Right.
You can't, it's so we are responsible for our own healing. I'm here to facilitate, and I'm here to help you like pull back the veil at like other possibilities of how to support you during your own process of recuperation. So that's what I do.
Yeah, I love that. It feels like a much more well-rounded, and it brings the person into the process by providing these herbs, and like there is like a protocol to follow.
Yeah.
Whereas sometimes if maybe you get an astrology or tarot reading or something, okay, you have all this information, then like how do I move through this? Now I kind of have the big picture, but like how do we go through?
Yeah. Yeah, it totally, because I've been there on that other side of it many times. Fully support as a practitioner to to be someone who goes to see other practitioners as well. And yeah, it's definitely supporting that, like, that tangible everydayness of how to go about it. I can't like tell you how to do everything, right? Because then that, I believe in free will. So, an agency, absolutely. So, but there's also a delicate nuance when we're working with, as a practitioner, of like when to not overstep, and when to not push too hard, and when to be delicate with other people's processes and time and space, because that looks different literally from every single person who I see. So adjusting and holding space for other people's process is sometimes all that I need to do. Sometimes people just need to help be shown the wider scope of things, or to be shown the detail of things. It really depends case to case, but I think what's helpful for a lot of people who come to see me is that anchoring of like practical tangibility with a process where you can actually like put it down, ground it, and then have a place to kind of witness how it's grown, as opposed to just, okay, I'm getting this reading and I'm stepping back for months, and then like it's all in a place that isn't visible. So I like to kind of make and that comes from me making my own process of growth visible too. Sometimes we need to kind of see it in order to really trust it and trust the process, and like, and to feel good about the fact that, I'm moving forward with something, or I'm deepening into something too. Because I think that that's really, really important as someone who's learned a lot through this process of over the course of years of doing this work, is like holding space for yourself, and also the reality that shapes that, in terms of it's not always just about moving forward, leaving the past behind, pushing ahead. Like, it's very much not about like hustling through your healing. Like, fuck that. I'm sorry, but like, fuck that. I'm very much aware of how important it is to not tell someone it's going to get better, it's going to be okay, to a point where you're dissolving the importance of their process and their reality, and your reality too, because there are times when that is not applicable and not okay to tell somebody. So it's helping me shape that, I think, for myself as a human, not necessarily like as a practitioner, of course, but as someone who is also going through something unique to me right now, a whole new level of grief and healing for me, that it gives me better language for myself and for my practitioners as well.
Absolutely. And I want to highlight that idea of holding space for yourself, because I think often, and I don't think it's just practitioners or intuitives that are better at holding space for others than we are at holding space for ourselves. But I recently had a reading where this reader told me, are you sure your efficiency and your constant output isn't a trauma response? And I was like,
yeah.
Like, yeah, it probably is.
I had that realization this week for myself, actually. So yeah, but it was a little bit, different, but it was kind of around the same thing, when I was like, oh my God, for me, it's a specific trauma response that is how I've been, that's kind of under this level of like needing to be efficient and needing to be helpful. That's a very Virgo thing. That's a very sixth house thing. And I realized, I was like, oh my God, it's a response to, it's a motivation from urgency, that everything is urgent, everything's an emergency. And I do better when I'm under pressure, because of that long-term chronic almost like thing that I didn't realize until literally a few days ago, having this realization with the last square Pluto-Mercury square, to kind of finalize that. That was a couple days ago. So yeah, Same.
Yeah. But I think also, I don't think it's just us. I think if going back to what you said about having to consider our health and what we think of as healthy and our own self-care. And I think we're all as a collective redefining that. I think the
Oh, hell
pandemic
yeah.
definitely put like the brakes on like what was happening, this constant need to produce. And we were like, whoa, what do I actually need to be healthy?
Exactly. That's definitely something that I've seen across the board with clients, with myself, with people on social media, with people in real
Mhm.
life. That's a very collective thing that I think is good. I think
Yeah.
it's necessary, that we're kind of asking questions and demystifying the process. Well, yeah, but we're like deconditioning from actually kind of capitalistic hustle
Hmm.
mentality, and productivity, and we're realizing we are human, number one, and we are so much more, and we need a spectrum of experiences, and we need a spectrum of like engagement with ourself on all these different levels to not
Hmm.
suppress, that like to not suppress our creativity, to not suppress our, ability to literally have emotions
Hmm.
for so many people who are like have negative relationships. And I understand negative relationships with anger, like, or with sadness or fear. Like those are all those types of emotions that get kind of demonized, and with
Hmm.
understanding, because it's those are more challenging, but those emotions aren't good or bad. They're emotions that we need to express
Right.
sometimes, and anger is like super healthy to
Yeah.
express, and so is sadness, and
Hmm.
so is fear.
Hmm.
um so through the pandemic last year and this year, Um, I'm so glad that most people aren't saying anymore, I just want to get back to normal.
Yeah.
Because normal was actually what was good about that normal.
Hmm.
Um, and how different of a person are you now because we weren't able to go back to normal? What did
Hmm.
that force you to see? And that was definitely difficult for a lot of
Yeah.
people. But I also know a lot of those people are much better and feels I almost want to cry because I'm thinking of one person specifically who, if she didn't go through what she went through last year, she wouldn't be um sh I think most people are becoming more authentic because of
Hmm.
it, because we're kind of forced to kind of take off these clothes, and those clothes had these layers of weight with expectations from
Hmm.
society, and I'm still feeling that myself too, but it's just it's a good thing because
Hmm.
it's allowing us to kind of be more authentic with every aspect of our realities right now.
Right. I think also like the big question for me, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, and I think it was the same for a lot of people, was who am I if I'm not my work? Right?
Oh,
Because so much
yeah.
of my identity was wrapped up in what I did. And if I wasn't doing this thing, then was I even a person? Like how do I move through the world?
Oh, so I relate to that 100%. That was a huge part of my own process. And I was someone who worked in corporate America for basically right out of college. I was lucky enough to get a job in my field that I studied,
Hmm.
and I got my dream job. And as soon as I got it, I realized that I didn't want this, and I had to stay there for a couple more. I stayed there for a couple more years, and I finally let go of it and started doing Daughter of Wands full time.
Mm.
And it wasn't until this year, really this year, when working with a very specific plant.
Hmm.
It was during Virgo season, but it was pretty recently actually, where
Hmm.
I had a lot of these realizations that I was finally able to admit to myself that I was actually still in hustle mode after
Hmm.
all these years, even though I
Right.
wasn't in corporate America and nobody had those expectations of me. I
Hmm.
still held on to them internally. And a lot of it was self pressure, but a lot of it was like, you have to prove to yourself that like you can make it without having a
Right.
full-time job. And now I'm like, prove what the fuck to who?
Exactly.
Like I'm happier that I'm not
Yeah.
on the computer for 10 hours a day, every day, all of these things. And it wasn't until working with monkshood or aconite or wolfsbane, a poisonous plant. And
Mm.
we mentioned at the top that
Yeah.
that I'm an advocate for poisonous, wayside, and invasive plants. And that's basically all the plants that like people, that, like gardeners, specifically, I guess, because
Mm.
they're cultivating and curating a very specific, and there's a lot of like unwanted things that come in there all the time
Mm.
and choke things out or grow where you don't want them to grow. And those are the plants that are kind of controversial, that humans have assigned a negative thing to, but that plant is literally just doing its thing. Like,
Right.
we created that fear, we created that energy around that plant, and those are the plants that I choose to work with. And I think a lot of that has to do with my own experience in childhood, with being someone who I guess was like felt like that in a lot of my own social situations.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it is like that's, I guess, in a way, that's my own inner child work when I
Mm-hmm.
work with these plants, because it's recognizing a certain aspect of my own past and a certain aspect of how I felt, and it helps me regulate, and it helps me visualize, contextualize, and release a lot of those um, shadows within myself, that I guess I still hold on to in some ways, of like, being the underdog, or not being seen ever for my own gifts or my own talents, or nobody trusting me when I'm saying what I'm seeing or
Mm.
feeling, or literally being forced to kind of be quiet a lot, or being told I was too intense or too much. And I'm, again, like those plants, like bindweed, for example, one of my favorites,
Mm.
which is morning glory. Like,
Okay.
I'm just trying to be here. And a lot of those plants actually, a lot of invasive plants actually have a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mother Nature is intelligent
Way
and
smarter than us.
way smart, and there's a lot that we don't know or
Mm-hmm.
understand about these things. So who are we to judge and who are we to say? But for example, a lot of those invasive plants are actually remedial, which
Mm.
means that they're coming in for an actual purpose, because that ecosystem and that environment is not healthy.
Mm.
And so bindweed, for example, um, like English ivy is a classic one that a lot of people love or hate because it's so
Mm-hmm.
beautiful, but hate it because it takes over trees and it takes over whole ecosystems. But that actually cleans the air, because there's too much air pollution in that area.
Mm. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of simplifying it. There's more like
Mm-hmm.
chemical stuff that's happening. Irises, which are somewhat invasive, actually, yellow irises, which are now known for their ability to clean water. So they grow near. So there's just like
Mm-hmm.
poison ivy is actually a famous one, um, for good reason why humans keep their distance from it. But that's a classic remedial plant where it's coming in because it's telling humans, no
Mm-hmm.
humans in this area, no
Oh.
trespassing, because there's been too much human disturbance, in the soil, by like these trees, these plants in this area actually need a break. So
You just filled my
it's
heart. I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful
Yeah,
plant. We would
I felt
recognize
something
it.
too. Yeah, poison ivy as a flower essence. So I work a lot with flower essences because they do address the like psycho-spiritual,
Mm.
emotional aspects. When we work with poisonous plants and flower essences, the good thing with that is that that's the safest way to work with poisonous plants if you
Mm.
want to ingest them, because they aren't physically touching the water. So, for example, it's way different than teas or extracts or tinctures, because you're actually putting the physical plant and you're infusing it in water or
Right.
oil or something like that. So the physical plant you would be ingesting.
Mm.
And with flower essences, you can put the flower in the water, or with a lot of poisonous plants, you'll see I do this a lot. I just put a bowl of water
Mm-hmm.
next to the plant. So no part of the plant is actually touching it, but the energetic vibration of that plant is being recorded into that water through the alchemical process of like the sun's rays touching the plant and touching the water. And it's like this or you can do it with the moon. Um, it's like this recording process. And then you would like take that water, dilute it down and ingest it, or you can put it on your acupressure points, and you can do a lot of stuff with it.
Is there a difference whether you would ingest it or put it on your acupressure points?
I notice I tend to always ingest it, but that's
Mm-hmm.
just because I like that process. It's like yeah, I like that process. But the difference I would say is I've noticed for me um is if I might be in a very specific situation where I might want to just put it maybe on my third eye
Mm.
for a specific ritual,
Mm.
or actually for sleep.
Okay.
If I want to dream with that plant, I might do this or ingest it at the same time too. Um, I actually sometimes I put my flower essences on candles for like spell work sometimes,
Okay.
just for like additional intention. But or I might do the heart or the wrist points for like moments of intense stress to
Mm.
just kind of absorb it into the skin that way. But most of my work tends to be ingesting. And
Mm.
yeah, so working with poison ivy, to kind of come back to that point with what we just
Mm.
shared about, it's extreme boundary medicine,
Mm.
obviously. And working with that as a flower essence can really be helpful for a lot of people who have really difficult time saying no, or who need to work on their boundaries. And it's a lot of I so what I'll say about this is that a lot of poisonous plants, um, in my experience, I know just like we said at the top with astrology, with I recognize that I'm a continual student and I always will
Mm.
be. There's never a limit to like what we can know. So I recognize that I still have a lot to learn with a lot of things. But so far in my experience with poisonous plants specifically is that there's something a little bit deeper with poisonous,
Mm.
and I love every kind of plant, but with
Right.
poisonous plants, there's a little bit more of a spectrum
Mm.
and recognition and acknowledgement of like not just good vibes, right? It's like
Mm.
the acknowledgement that sometimes the darker or the deeper or the more challenging side of the spectrum of experience, of human experience, is what we need as the medicine to help us grow or to help us be with ourself in our reality, in our sphere, and to actually embrace us and embrace ourself and our process like 100 times more.
Mm.
Sometimes accepting and going into the deeper layers of the self and the darker parts of ourself is where we actually find communion with the self in
Mm.
ways that we can't with another plant, another plant
Right.
like a daisy. I mean, I'm sure we actually can with daisies, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. It kind of
Um,
reminds me of, how a lot of us are drawn to these villainous characters in stories or movies and things like that because the good, like always happy character doesn't have depth for us. We're like, there's something missing there. Whereas the
yes.
villainous character's like, oh, there's layers there. Like I could understand more of this character and relate to more aspects of this character.
Totally. I love that actually. I love that. Yeah, there's surprisingly that just makes me think of well, I guess not surprisingly, but the queen and the evil queen in Snow White.
Hmm.
I think I watched that recently last year and for the first time since like childhood, and I was like, "Oh my God, there's so much more nuance to her." like I was like, look at that in the background, look at that symbolism, look at that. Oh my God, there's so much more depth with her, and she's such an interesting character watching it with like someone who works with poisonous plants or whatever. Just really interesting. But yeah, so yeah, poison ivy, great boundary medicine, really, really helpful, and working with to kind of bring it full circle a little bit with what we were talking about with everything that's been happening with who we are, just discovering ourselves through the pandemic really is for me another plant that was really helpful in the process of witnessing myself, and like allowed me to actually say out loud a lot of the things that I had been struggling with over the course of this year. More specifically was monkshood, in the fact that it helped me realize a lot of things that like the hustle of like, oh my God, you're still internalizing those pressures, and that it was those expectations to be productive, to you know, you have no identity other than what you put out into the world. Other than Daughter of Wands, I was resisting a lot of my own like needing to be Kathleen outside of Daughter of Wands in my personal life, being so busy with putting output with Daughter of creating output, creative content, that I like neglected the fact like I barely spent any time with my partner, you know, and that's changed a lot this year. And monkshood, it was a really beautiful teacher. Foxglove was too, but Daughter of Wands. Monkshood was a beautiful teacher in me realizing over the course of taking it that I kept saying in my head, I just want to be a human.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in being a girl boss. Like, you know, I'm just not interested in that anymore, because it feels, it doesn't, you know, I'm also recognizing a lot of like my own neurodiversity for the first time. And realizing like the methods of like how you're supposed to do these things, or how other people do these things, and hustle, and like have other people's success isn't a template that fits on me. And that was a big, along with other things, was a big acknowledgement from monkshood that relieved so much pressure. And monkshood was just like, you just got to fucking let it go. Yeah. You really have to let it go. And you know, they were like, we'll work on it every day. I'm not going to abandon you. And that's the beautiful thing about poisonous plants, I think, is that they teach us how to actually be human. Because they don't really, not that other plants abandon us in the process. Really, that's our projection of like us abandoning ourselves, or are in the process of healing, because it's difficult. And I think the poisonous plants really help hold space for the difficulty of and the challenge of acceptance with a lot of things. And they nurture us through that process. Of course, Rose does too. I just feel like monkshood and foxglove and poison ivy are some henbane too, are just some plants that I have personally worked with where have kind of kicked me in the ass a little bit, but there was also, because of that, it was a huge turning point in my growth, and they helped me see myself more so than working with maybe Daisy.
But I want to go back to, you said something that hit me too, because it's something I've been working through, continue to work through, and it's this idea of being a multifaceted human being with multiple interests and multiple dimensions, and working within a culture that's telling us to be one thing. To be successful, you must do one thing, and you have to be this brand or this niche or whatever they call it. And it's something I've really struggled with over the last year. And I'm starting to allow myself, maybe I'm more than just one thing in terms of work and outside of work. And maybe I'm actually this multifaceted human with many interests that could do many things.
Yeah, I feel that, because you're right. I mean, I'm very similar, and I guess, you know, I'm still figuring that out, like what what that looks like for me, because that's all that I can really speak to. But I think for me, it's really just about, because I've done a lot of things over the years, and years ago I used to have a skincare little side hustle brand, and it was an herbal skincare brand, and then once that became work for me, once it became something that I didn't enjoy doing anymore, then I had to stop. Even years before that, when I was in college, I did, because I went to school for art, I would make these things and like sell them on Etsy. And then once that became work, I kind of went through a lot of these processes of finding myself through content, through like productivity, through output. And that's okay. Like, I'm a Leo rising. That's like the way that I kind of find myself, is by like creation. And like, that's cool. That's fine. Like, I'm not, I'm still going to do that. Like, I still love in creating things. And it's just the voice and the vehicle and the mode of finding that has changed over the course of the years. And I think, what that has looked like for me in discovering those things and then adapting it to find my voice, or how do I go about doing this on like a small business level. I think for me, like finding the niche and all of that stuff, I definitely like have struggled with that a lot, because I feel like I finally settled into something that feels like it can be a niche, but I'm also like not interested in that too. I don't really have an answer, but I
don't think there needs to be one. I think
exactly. I think it's just about
yeah.
exploring. It's just about like having fun and exploring your passions, I think, and to not let it be a thing that has to be scary, or for you to be scared out of doing.
I think what you're also offering others is an example of how to hold space for yourself, even in the unknown, because that can be scary to say, I'm just going to do these things that interest me, that may or may not work, that may or not bring money, that may not be long term, but I'm just going to hold space for myself and do them anyway because they spark something in me that makes me want to do it.
That right there, what you said, was a big process for me this year, because I did kind of step aside from daughter. I took a little sabbatical, an unannounced sabbatical a little bit, when I was actually processing my grief for the loss of my father earlier this year. And at first, when that happened, I didn't allow myself to really process it. I had my peace and everything, and I went right into work mode. I went right into survival mode. And now I'm looking, and I like was teaching still right at that time, still seeing clients like the day after or whatever. And I was now looking back, I'm like, wow, how the hell did I do that? And it wasn't until the summer hit when it all hit me. And I feel with the process of actually like, oh, okay, now now this is actually like forcing me to process all of this. And through that process, I really couldn't do any of my work. I really had to be in it. And through that, like you said, like sometimes we just need to do stuff over here. And sometimes it's to problem solve, to stepping back and doing something different to problem solve, and then coming back to the business or the thing in front of us that felt stagnant or stuck. It kind of gives us a fresh perspective and fresh eyes, and we kind of are easily able to kind of switch it up or to move forward with it. Right. And for me, that was helpful with the grief, and it was a several month process, and it needed to be, and it's never going to go away, and that's good, and that's fine, and that's that's grief.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to change that. And I also realized with Mangsa again that okay, I'm moving through my grief, great. And I needed to actually just draw. I needed to just do other things. I couldn't really be working with astrology and these big concepts. It really took me out of myself. The plants were helpful for me because they helped ground me and be in my body, and they helped me see my grief. A lot of plants are really helpful for that. And I was working with Foxglove a lot at that time. Foxglove is really helpful for those with a broken heart. At the time, I didn't realize I had one. And Foxglove allowed me to just open up just a little bit and draw again, get excited about things again. I was like, oh yes, I'm fucking drawing again. And I was like creating art, and it really helped me process. That's for me,
So
that
the
I always go back to
foxglove, you're saying the foxglove helped you realize you had a broken heart so that it would begin to open again, because that's essentially what we're talking about, right? When our heart is broken. But sometimes I just recently experienced a broken heart or realized I had one. And it felt like when I finally acknowledged it, then I took away that barrier in front of it. And then I was able to like fully experience life, because otherwise you're just holding a wall in front of this gash in your chest.
Exactly. Yeah. What I noticed, what I experienced with Foxglove for that was that it was almost like I was standing in this blown out like nuclear dump of a city that used to be there. And that was like what my heart was like. And the atmosphere, like the bubble of the atmosphere of the air around it, or the ozone, I guess I'll say, opened up just a tiny bit like this. And Foxglove was like water pouring in for the first time to water the ground that I was standing on and for grass to grow again. So Foxglove was the first thing to help me nourish with that water, to, like you said, it's broken, the heart is broken, but there's still a barrier so that we don't continue to hurt ourselves, right? And Foxglove was like, okay, that's still there, that's cool, but like, I'm just going to help you a little bit to come back, to nourish yourself and to find yourself. And it really was a big turning point for me in like doing a lot of deep, for me, because it also works on the heart energetically, and it's very sprightly, fey oriented plant, where it really was a lot of sometimes, in when we think about the heart chakra, we don't often talk about or think about the back of the heart chakra, or what's sitting at the bottom of the heart, and it's kind of like Foxglove, which is another poisonous plant, by the way. Actually, I feel like what it was doing was kind of like squeezing out and releasing and acknowledging at the same time all of those shadows and undigested, like, back of the heart, or like inner child shadow aspects, because I was doing a lot. I was super creative during that time. And I also was noticing that I was like having a lot more fun, laughing a lot, and be like feeling childlike for the first time in a long time. And it helped me break up a lot of the over serious bearing that wasn't my own, that was conditioning, of like, that it's not like, grow up. So it allowed, it was Foxglove was like, fuck that, I'm gonna like, I need to experience this part of the spectrum too. So it was really, really helpful for that. And for the broken heart aspect, it helped bring back nourishment to the foundational levels of that. It was really, really helpful, big turning point. So yeah.
I love that, because so many of us, especially over the last year, we're dealing with grief, like actual grief and death of loved ones, but we're also grieving the death of our past life, the death of our identities. I think
that's where I was going with that. Right? Yeah.
So we're moving into, and we're also moving into a space that kind of astrologically that pertains to death, right? We're in Scorpio season. We're moving into the eclipses. So I think a lot of us may have some unrecognized grief.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what I will just really quickly share, that through that process of working with Foxglove, with mending the broken heart, or accepting, and knowing that the heart can still have grass in that like burnt out area, that grass grows back. Your heart can too, and that with that process of grief with my father over the course of time, I mentioned monkshood already. I took monkshood after Foxglove, and it wasn't until monkshood that I recognized the hustle mentality. But the larger picture of that was I wasn't just grieving my father, I was actually grieving a loss of myself and a big part of my identity because of a healing crisis that I'm going through right now with discovering that I have an autoimmune disorder, and I physically can't do what I was able to do up until now, like my whole life. I can't physically output as much stuff as I used to be able to do. I have to drastically put a huge brake on how fast I was moving. And because of that, that's part of the grieving process for me. And it's a big permission slip, absolutely, to like slow down. Yes, I'll take it. But I also, because of that, and the body's much slower in processing things than the mind is, or even sometimes the emotions. And so I feel like what was also this is like just a huge thing that I went through this summer, and I still am, that the physical stuff, the loss of self, the loss of my father was also mixed in with this level of like recognizing that my body, that I have been operating mentally in that hustle mentality for 10 plus years, and my body is now finally beginning to recuperate from being burnt out for 10 plus years. And that adds to that like level of like I can't do anything, and I feel guilty about it. Yeah. So it's like all these really complicated feelings. And I think Foxglove, monkshood were the two ones this late summer to really help me actually get help and work through it, and acknowledge that. And it's just this huge weight off my shoulders. And those are two poisonous plants. And monkshood is no joke. It is the queen of poisons. That's the moniker for it. So I do recommend monkshood flower essence for people. If what you're hearing, listening to this resonates, monkshood is no joke, but I highly recommend it to people going through all of this right now. Like I said, if you're someone who's never worked with poisonous plants, it might not be the best like introduction to poisonous plants, because it definitely is. It will literally say, it will show you these things.
In what way? Like, would it be just very intense?
Yeah. I mean, everybody's going to be different because it's flower essences. And I think for me, how I noticed it on an everyday level, if you'll notice it in your dreams, you might really have really intense dreams. And they do say that when we have nightmares or even violent dreams, that is the psyche actually, like that's actually your body or your psyche showing you that you are breaking patterns, like mental patterns and things like that. That's apparently what they say. And
well, then that's great, because I have horrible dreams all the time.
Yeah. It's supposedly that's like part of that symbolism. But you kind of have to like kind of match that with like, do you feel that in your waking life? Like how, and kind of noticing the subtle changes that you've made. And I think with the flower essences and with monkshood specifically, how it's shown me those things is through dreams, as well as like very obvious dreams where, it's kind of like you're doing this very obvious thing. You're like, oh, when you wake up, like, oh, I actually did change something. Oh, that's the plant actually telling me this like very intense thing. I do a lot of channeling with plants too. So in my journeys or in my meditations, I will get the plant like very specifically showing me something. Of course, that would be different for everybody. And for the obvious, like day to day, how am I like proving this in real time? It was the mental, those mental things that I was actually noticing, what I was saying to myself. Like, I just want to be human. You are actually depressed. That's great. Let's look at that. All of those things where if I wasn't working with monkshood, I wouldn't have had the capacity or the space to kind of bend that light and shift to that spectrum to acknowledge what I didn't consciously want to acknowledge. So that's what I mean with poisonous plants and maybe monkshood specifically. If you're again, your experience will be your own, and it also like is what you make out of it too. It also depends on like how often you're taking the essence. You know, I was taking it several times a day for a month. So you'll notice things quicker if you take it more. It's just one of those things. But for me, it was definitely like a very easy acknowledgement of the weight that I was carrying. Other people were like, that was really intense for me because I take it in a group setting, through my flower essence subscription that I offer.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, every zodiac season we take a new flower essence together.
According to the astrological.
Yeah, it's a mix. So it's definitely according to what kind of feels right for that season, through transits or through like what's happening in the sphere of like Scorpio season, for example. It's mixed in with that as an acknowledgement, as well as actually the essence that we take before it, because a lot of people stay.
Oh, okay.
And so it kind of, if the last one was really intense and this season feels really intense that we're moving into, I might actually do something a little bit more gentle or supportive and integrative to help integrate what we just kind of went through. So it's a lot of mix with that. So, and also to kind of make sense with with Scorpio. So for Scorpio season, we're working with a mushroom to compost and to fertilize and to like alchemically transform a lot of the stuff that we've been working through in the previous months, which is like great for Scorpio season to go deeper into the fascia mycelia of the self and the sphere. So we're working with Amanita crenulata, which is like a cousin of that fairy tale mushroom, the fly agaric. That red and white.
Is that the red one?
Yeah.
Oh, so pretty.
Yeah, so we're working with a white version of that, or
Okay.
a taupey version of that. So it's been really powerful dreams, working with a mushroom. But yeah, so monkshood, to kind of wrap that up with what I was saying, I realized I went on a tangent there, is that
But it's a beautiful tangent, so we could keep listening to you.
so I just think that, like, long story short for that, that's been based on my own experience and those working through it. That one has been really helpful if you feel like you need a kick in the butt, and if, in the best way possible, to help cathartically release a lot of stuff. If you're holding on to a lot of shadow things and you're like, nothing's kind of like, I feel as if monkshood would be really helpful to just say, here it is very clearly. Here's how to like move forward with this. So sometimes we're not always ready to hear things in a very clear and precise way, but monkshood can hold space for that too. So
I'm wondering, now that you say that, I recently discovered that I'm in my beginning of Uranus opposition. Am I saying that correctly? Which is crazy intense.
Oh.
And it feels like, and I've heard it from others too, that say it's almost over the last year we've all been working through in the physical realm all our biggest fears, kind of here they are to deal with.
Yeah.
Would that be the kind of plant that you would take on during that time, or do you think that would be too intense a time for what we're both individually working on and collectively going through?
Yeah, I think it depends on the individual, of course, and I would say a couple things to that. One, if you're someone who feels like, yeah, all your shit is on the table and it's very clear to you what you need to address, then you might not need something like monkshood. But if you have everything on the table and you know what it is, but you don't know how to move forward with it, I might suggest another poisonous plant, a surprising poisonous plant, which is daffodil. Daffodil is a poisonous plant. And daffodil is really helpful to just like, okay, here's everything I need to do. And it gives you the confidence to just get it done. and to show you that it's actually achievable to move forward with like these big concepts or these even scary concepts. It's achievable to move through it on an everyday way. Daffodil was immensely surprising to work with, in the best way possible, where I just felt like I couldn't not do anything. And I think that's really helpful for people who have a fear of the unknown, which is most people, because it's a very human thing to feel. Daffodil's really helpful for that, if mixed in with like the fear of like, I just don't want to start it because it's scary. It's mixed in with like, I don't even know where to start. So, and it's like, it's also a very encouraging, confident building plant too. So daffodil is really good for a lot of those things. And it also has a brightness to it, where if all of those shadowy aspects that we have on the table are scary and they're dampening and they're darkening to our spirit, daffodil will kind of address a lot of those things actually, and kind of go, all right, you know what? It's not going to like do See, I know what I said there. Toxic positivity. It's not that type of plant, but it's just like, I got this. You know, so daffodil might be one that I would suggest.
Well, it's kind of like when you said that, I was thinking of your example of how even in our darker times, we could still find joy. Like just because things are dark and shadowy doesn't mean we have to be like damp and down. Like there are pockets of joy we could find and rise to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So maybe it's that duality.
Oh, absolutely. I really, really love that about that. And I think daffodil is a great plant for that. I would say to continue answering your question, if you feel as if you're someone who might say, because this is also people that like I could be this way too, where it's like, I know that something's on the precipice. I get this all the time. Like, I know change is right around the corner, but you're not actually sure what is on the table. Like you're not actually able to definitively say, this is what I need to change, or here's something that I need to address. You know that there's something there, but you don't see it clearly. Then I might say monkshood to help you like just pinpoint here's what it is. It's going to help you like discern and like break away the muckiness and reveal with clarity what it is that's like important to work on. I think daffodil can also do that too. Daffodil brings a lot of clarity to things like that. But if you're someone who's really generally unsure, then I would say monkshood in this case. Yeah, I think that's a great thing for that too. I think, and you also mentioned like collectively, you know, to generally address all of those things. If you find yourself, you're not really like either one of those people, if you're like kind of in between or generally, I think walnut flower essence is a great flower essence for all of us in 2021, including last year too. Walnut or oak, any type of tree actually is a really good essence to work with because it gives us flexibility, specifically walnut and oak too. They're both really good for knowing when to be flexible through moments of transition. And that's like big cycles of transition where like Uranus opposition, for example, is like that's not a day thing. That's like, that's a long-term transit, or that's a big term transit. So walnut also works for those long-term transits. So just like being flexible is exactly the remedial thing that we need for Uranus specifically. We know that Uranus brings, and we're having a Uranus opposition to today's new moon too. So thank you, Uranus. You know, the great lessons about Uranus is that it does bring us unexpected surprises. And for a lot of people, that destabilization is really scary. Because we're humans and we like our comfort zones, and you know, sometimes those surprises are not fun or not things that we want to be fun or that we want to be like a surprise. It's not the kind of surprise where it's like, hey, I stopped by and here's a box of chocolates. I mean,
Right.
maybe it is, but it's more like, here's this letter that you're getting in the mail, and maybe it's something that you didn't realize. It can be anything, or a conversation you weren't expecting. It can be anything with Uranus, and that's like the remedy for that, or the way to lean into and honor Uranus or any type of Uranus transit, whether it's a personal one or one like today, is to be flexible and to be adaptable to these situations, and to know that it's not the end all say all. And it's also like everything is temporary.
Right.
Something like walnut is really good for those long-term transitional periods where you need to be a little bit more flexible, especially if like you're meeting roadblock after roadblock and like things aren't going your way. Walnut and oak are really good to kind of just release a little bit of rigidity through that process.
Right. I love that. I want to talk forever, but I promised folks I'd go about an hour. But I do want listeners and people watching on the YouTube channel to be able to find you and maybe join your monthly subscription service and get a reading. So where can they do all that?
So you can find all that information on my website, which is daughterofwands.com. Super easy. And my flower essence subscription is not just on my Patreon, it's also on my website too. Okay. So if you don't want to sign up for my Patreon, which is totally fine, you can also sign up to receive that monthly essence in the mail. So basically it's a literal subscription of a physical product that you get monthly. And we have a online Discord app where we like a online community where we talk about our experiences throughout the month, and then we have a monthly meditation to connect to that plant at the end of our time together. So it's just a fun thing. I love doing it. That you can find on my website, and as well as all my new shop updates of herbal products and flower essences, my whole range on my website as well. My one-on-one consultations are also on my website too.
Very cool. And I love that we had this talk now. It just so happened that I reached out to you because I just loved what you were doing, and a mutual friend virtually introduced me to you. Oh. But it's also the perfect talk because in our Wild Wonder Book Club, we're considering grief and how we move through grief. So this could be a good starting point of how do we move. And actually the book is Learning to Talk to Plants.
Amazing.
So we're going to start to consider these ideas of not just how we approach grief, how do we move through it, how do we hold space for ourselves, but also how plants play a role in our own healing.
Totally.
So yeah,
I love that.
I think it's magically perfect that we met when we did.
Yay. Thank you so much. And that book sounds amazing.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I'm so happy to talk to you, and you're obviously welcome back anytime.
Oh, thank you.
Go deeper on
it was so lovely to talk to you too. Thank you.
Too. Thanks so much. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.